Have you ever seen a company spend an absolute fortune just to make itself totally unrecognizable? Well, today we're going to dive into one of the most famous and, most expensive corporate identity crises of all time. The story of how British Airways tried to erase itself.
Yeah, $60 million. That's the price tag we're talking about right out of the gate. This is literally what British Airways spent on a paint job that was supposed to make them look more global, but, oh man, it just ended up becoming this legendary corporate mess.
In this slide right here, it gets right to the heart of the whole crazy thing. On the left, you've got the iconic Union Jack flag on the tailfin, a symbol everyone on the planet recognizes. And on the right, what they replaced it with? This collection of abstract world art. I mean, they paid millions to erase their most powerful symbol. It's wild.
So, to really get how this all went down, we got to jump back in time to 1997, okay? At this point, British Airways wasn't just an airline. They were the proud national carrier for the UK. Their planes were basically flying ambassadors, and their whole identity was deeply, and I mean unapologetically, British.
But this is where the logic just takes a nosedive. We're in the thick of 90s globalization, right? And the execs at BAA started thinking, you know what? Maybe being so British is actually a bad thing. They got this idea in their heads that in this new, super connected world, being too British would scare off international customers. A real head-scratcher.
So what was their grand solution to this problem? Well, it was this massive, super ambitious rebranding they called the World Images campaign. And let me tell you, it was supposed to launch them into this new cosmopolitan era, but it ended up being, well, deeply flawed.
Right, and the official line, the corporate spiel, was that they wanted to look more cosmopolitan and world-class. So in their minds, they weren't just slapping a new logo on a plane. No. They were trying to change how the entire world saw them. A pretty noble goal, I guess, but the execution, that's a whole other story.
Okay, so instead of picking one new design, which would be the normal thing to do, they commissioned 36 different artists to create these ethnic designs for the tail fins. So you'd be at an airport and see one plane with like Kalahari Bushman paintings, then right behind it, one with Chinese calligraphy, and then another with a Scottish tartan. It was less like an airline and more like a flying art gallery. A very confusing one.
You know, this kind of super complicated, highbrow justification for what is, at the end of the day, a design change. It's not a one-off thing. It kind of reminds you of that infamous Pepsi logo redesign back in '08, right? That thing came with this crazy, abstract design document. Both are just perfect examples of corporations just overthinking it. Big time.
So, the fallout was immediate, and it wasn't just some bad press. It snowballed into a full-blown identity crisis. The new designs created this really basic, super practical problem. People standing in the airport were literally looking at the planes and asking, whose plane is that anyway? Not a good look.
And this is what we can call an information gap. Think about it. A brand's logo, its visual identity, it's a shortcut. It tells you instantly who they are. By creating 36 different identities, BA completely shattered that shortcut. It got so bad that even air traffic controllers reportedly had a hard time identifying their planes. I mean, that's a serious problem.
So the key takeaway here is just brutal. The very thing that was supposed to make them look so world-class and unified, it made them look like a jumbled, random collection of totally different companies. Like a bunch of small, no-name airlines all parked at the same gate. They completely lost that visual cohesion, which, for a major global brand, is pretty much everything. But the real turning point, the moment this whole thing went from just a marketing blunder to a full-on national embarrassment, well, that came from a very, very powerful critic. And no one saw it coming.
Okay, you gotta picture this. There's this fancy launch party, right? They unveil a model of one of the new planes. And who's in the crowd? None other than former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady herself. And she happens to have her handkerchief on her. This is important. And this is the moment. This is the killer blow. Thatcher reportedly walks right over to the model plane, takes out her handkerchief, and just drapes it over the new world art on the tail fin. And she says, "We fly the British flag, not these awful things." I mean, you cannot buy that kind of publicity. For British Airways, it was an absolute PR nightmare. Yeah, after getting publicly roasted by one of the country's most iconic figures, the writing was on the wall. The lesson here was just brutal and incredibly expensive, and it was simple.
Don't spend a fortune trying to erase the very thing that makes you, you. So the Great Retreat began.
And this timeline really just puts the whole fiasco into perspective, doesn't it? Kicks off in 1997. Just 2 years later, you get the public smackdown from Thatcher. And by 2001, the company officially throws in the towel and announces they're going back to the Union Jack. A very short and very, very expensive little experiment. And here we are, back to that staggering number, $60 million, just to get this thing off the ground. But wait, there's more. They then had to spend millions on top of that to repaint the entire global fleet back to the way it was before. Ouch.
And here's the ultimate irony in this whole saga. It turns out people, customers in the UK and all over the world, they actually liked the brand's Britishness. It meant something. It stood for quality, for heritage. The very identity the company spent a fortune to hide was actually one of its greatest strengths.
So, where do you land on this? What's the final verdict? Was this a noble, if maybe misguided, attempt at a more inclusive global identity? Or was it just over-engineered corporate nonsense that was completely out of touch with its audience? It's a heck of a cautionary tale in the world of branding, that's for sure.